Well, good morning, brothers and sisters at Grace Bible Chapel. This morning, again, we're going to continue to look at the Great Commission. And I want to look at the second phrase this morning. Yesterday, we saw how Jesus he's the authority. You know, that this command that he gives, this commission that he gives, it comes because he has all authority, and just how important that is. That it's not a suggestion, it's not something that we, maybe can do. It's what he commands us to do. And he comes at that from a position of truth and a position of authority. This morning we're going to look at the second phrase. And this is actually the only imperative command that is given in the Great Commission. And let's take a look at it in Matthew chapter 28. And this is verse 19 that says this: "Go therefore and make disciples of all nations." Go and make. It's the only imperative command. Now there's two things that are really key to this statement, things that are actually profound in what Jesus is saying. First, he's telling his disciples that they're to go to all nations. Not just to the Jews. Now that's actually really important. We even see in the first part of Acts that there's hesitancy on the part of the disciples to spread the gospel past Jerusalem, past their own area, past their own group of people. There's always this hesitancy against that. We read of the vision that God gives Peter with regard to going to Cornelius's house, and it's this picture of this sheet that comes down and all these animals that are unclean for a Jew to eat, and the voice from heaven says, "Peter, rise and eat." He says, "Oh, I can't. And it's just, Jesus is emphasizing here that this is to all nations. How many times was Jesus questioned about, "Oh, you say you should love your neighbor. Well, who's your neighbor?" It's amazing that when they asked him about the law, he says, well, there's two. The law can be summed up in two things: love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. And what's the first question that they ask? Well, who's my neighbor? In other words, they don't mean to love like the Romans or the Samaritans. And then Jesus tells the story of the Good Samaritan. Ask who was a neighbor to the man. And it was the Samaritan who cared for him. And they answered correctly. He says, go and do likewise. See, it doesn't matter what nation you're from. And here, the Great Commission is to all nations. That's really key. That's really important. The second point I want to make is that the call is not to make converts. The call is not to just get people to accept Jesus. The call is to make disciples. So what's a disciple? Well, Jesus had disciples. He had 12 of them. And what did they do? They followed him around. They sat at his feet. They learned from him. He empowered them to do some of the things that he could do, and they set about doing his work. That's what a disciple is. A disciple isn't someone who just acquiesces to believing in something. A disciple is someone who learns from, who continually learns, and not just continually learns, but also is about the business of their master. And that's what we as the church are to do. Not just to preach the gospel, though that's important, but to make disciples. Not just to get people saved, but to bring them into fellowship with God and to bring them into that relationship with God that is one of a disciple, to follow the Lord Jesus. And if we're not emphasizing that, we're not doing our job. That's what we need to do. And we need to look at our own lives, and we need to examine ourselves and say, am I just a believer in Jesus, or am I a follower of Jesus? Am I his disciple? That's what we should be. And so this is the Great Commission. This is the imperative command, the only imperative command in the Great Commission. Go and make disciples of all nations. Hope this has been an encouragement to you this morning. God bless, and have a good day.